Kinders, it's circle time again. And yesterday I promised you that we would learn more about deserts from our friend Cat in the Hat. So here we go. Why, oh why, are deserts so dry? And here's a picture of a special bird that we might find in the desert called the roadrunner. And he's got a snake in his mouth. I'm the Cat in the Hat, and today is the day that we're off to see deserts. Let's leave right away. You may think that deserts are empty and bare, but you'll be surprised by the things that we'll find there. Insects and lizards, flowers and snow. Want to see for yourself? Buckle up. Let's go. Why are deserts dry? I'll be glad to explain. There aren't very many clouds above them to bring the rain. Without clouds, there is nothing to block the sun's light or hold the heat in, so it gets cold at night. Let me read that again. Without clouds, there is nothing to block the sun's light or to hold the heat in, so it gets cold at night. The air is so dry, any rain deserts do get dries up right away, so they do not stay wet. Without water, surviving in the deserts is rough. Plants, insects, and animals need to be tough. So they adapt, like we talked about before, so they can be tough to survive in the desert. All living things need to have water. So how do they live where it's dry? I will show you right now. Desert plants must find water. Some have ways to store it. Roots spread out to find it or reach down deep for it. Shallow roots of this cactus pull water through them. The cactus then stores it inside of its stem. There's a tree in the desert that's called a mesquite. Its roots reach for water down 40 feet. So they go down very deep. The cactus roots go out, spread out wide, and the mesquite tree's roots go down very deep. The Sonoran Desert is where we will find a very big cactus that's one of a kind. It's called the saguru. That's right. We learned about that cactus yesterday. It turned into be a cactus hotel. It's called the saguru, as I've been told, it can grow to be over 200 years old. A cactus, you see, has deep pleats in its skin. They will expand when the water flows in. It soaks up the water and then quickly swells like a sponge. It stores water in some of its cells. And there's the saguru cactus that can turn into a hotel for many birds and animals. Sharp spines protect it. Just how do they do it? They make sure some animals won't try to chew it. This Gila woodpecker knows very well that a cactus will serve as the perfect hotel. She pecks a small hole and then slips inside. It's cool and it gives her a safe place to hide. And there's the Gila woodpecker making her home in a saguru cactus. When she's ready to leave, well, I have little doubt someone else will move in after she has moved out. And there's the elf owl moving into the hole left by the woodpecker. How do insects get water? What some of them do is get water that's inside the plants that they chew. These desert insects are honeypot ants. All year long they collect the sweet nectar from plants. They store it inside them and then they can feed it to ants who are hungry whenever they need. So you can see their great big tummies. That's why they're called honeypot ants, because they store all that nectar in their great big tummies, and it gives them food and liquid for a long time. before their tummies get skinny again. And they share it with the other ants as well. The Namib Desert gets rain rarely. That means it doesn't get it very often. And yet fog comes from the sea. And we know that fog is water that has condensed into a gas, and it comes off of the sea and it makes everything on the land wet. You've woken up before when there's fog in the sky. When it lands on the grass, it's like dew. Here, the fog-basking beetle has a way to survive, getting water it needs to help it stay alive. Now, this is kind of neat. What it does is it tilts its body so that little drops from the fog, the drops of water, drip down its body and down its head and into its mouth. It tilts up its abdomen, that's its tummy. Water droplets soon slide down its body and into its mouth, open wide. So that's why it's called the fog-basking beetle, because in the Namib Desert, they get fog off of the sea, and this beetle soaks up the water droplets from the fog and lets them drip down his body into its mouth. Animals differ in the food that they eat and the ways they keep cool in the dry desert heat. In the daytime, small animals stay underground. Later on, when it's cooler, they move above ground. So, what are those animals called that come out at nighttime and stay where it's cool and sleep during the day? We've talked about those animals before. That's right. They're called nocturnal animals. In the desert, many of the animals are nocturnal because it's too hot for them to be out in the daytime, so they come out at nighttime. This cute Phoenix fox furry-soled feet help him walk on hot sand. His big ears let out the heat. So here's some adaptations that the fennec fox has that let him survive in the desert. He's got the furry feet. That would be like having a sandal on your foot or a slipper so that you wouldn't feel the heat from the sand. And his big ears make the heat radiate outwards. That would be maybe like wearing a big hat with a big wide rim around it. Kangaroos lick their arms to help cool off their skin. Then each digs a hole in the ground and climbs in. So there's the kangaroo licking her skin and digging the hole to climb in to get cool. We asked this lizard how he spends his days. Each morning, he's warmed by the sun's gentle rays. So in the morning, when it hasn't gotten too hot, he's on his stone, warming up a little bit. But by midday, that's at noontime or lunchtime, it's too hot. It's hotter and it's time to hide. He slips into his burrow and goes deep inside. There he is basking in the early morning on the rock, and here he is at noon, midday, going in his burrow underground to cool down. In the late afternoon, he's back in the sun again. It is not as hot now, and the day is almost done, so it's starting to get cooler. Because we know in the evenings and during the night, we said it gets quite cool in the desert. Because there's no clouds to hold the heat from the daily sun in the air. Then he's back in his burrow to sleep through the night. He'll be up with the sun just as soon as it's light. So he's not a nocturnal animal. He's one that comes out during the day for part of the day and just keeps cool in his burrow when it's too hot to be out. Hawks, eagles, and vultures fly high in the air. They stay off the ground because it's much cooler up there. There they are, flying high in the sky to stay cool. Kangaroo rat never drinks. Can you imagine? The rat never drinks any water, the kangaroo rat. Well, how does she stay hydrated? She eats lots of seeds. The water inside them is all that she needs. So by eating those seeds, she gets the moisture because there's water inside the seeds she eats. At the beginning of the book, we mentioned a bird called a roadrunner. Roadrunners can fly, but they usually run. They catch lizards and snakes in the hot desert sun. So there's the roadrunner running, and he's got a snake in his mouth. They can run very, very fast. The Sahara Desert, geographers say, is almost as big as the whole USA. That's a pretty big desert, almost as big as the whole country of the United States. Here the crowned sand grouse flies high in the sky, miles and miles to find water. And I'll tell you why. His babies are thirsty and waiting for him, so when he finds water, he quickly flies in. He soaks his feathers until they are wet. This water is all that his babies will get. So, the sand grouse does not have water right where he's staying. He has to fly miles and miles and miles to find some. And when he finds it, he soaks his whole body in it and then comes back as quickly as possible so his babies can get drips of water off of his fur and off of his down. That's all the water that the babies get. They drink from his feathers, which will soon dry, and then he must take to the sky to find water again. So he has to keep flying all those miles and back to keep getting water for the babies to drink from his feathers. And that's in the Sahara Desert, which is almost as big as, yes, the United States. Out here in the desert, when winds start to blow, there are few plants to help hold the sand down. And so, the wind blows the sand, which forms into dunes. It makes shapes in the sand like these crescent moons. So there's not a lot of plants to hold the sand down. When the wind blows, it blows into dunes or waves of sand called crescents, and there they are. Or sand dunes. If you've ever been to Picton, there's sand dunes there. And that sand, over many years, has been blown into sand dunes or sand hills. What's this nomad wearing? It's called a burnous. It protects him from sun. It's long and it's loose. People called nomads spend their whole lives here. They move place to place and keep moving all year. So, some of the people that live in the desert are called nomads, and they travel on this kind of animal that you may have seen before called a camel. They wear very loose, light clothing to keep them protected from the sun and to keep cool. And they travel and they trade goods that they have, things they have with other people for money. Now, we've been hearing about a few different deserts. We heard about the Namib Desert. We heard about the Sonoran Desert. We heard about the Sahara Desert. And here's another one called the Mojave Desert. Plants bloom, grow, and die, but they leave seeds behind in the ground. And that's why, when it rains, these seeds burst into flowers so bright. There's a rainbow of colors, a beautiful sight. So it doesn't rain very often, and sometimes those seeds have been sitting there for a long time, waiting for that one big rain that comes that helps them burst into color. And the color does not last very long. They will not live long, but before it is over, there are lilies, primroses, sunflowers, and owl clover. Some flowers stay open for only one day. Hummingbirds drink their nectar and then fly away. We heard about that big, ripe, juicy fruit that comes from the flower on top of the saguaro cactus that only flowers for one day. And we heard about the birds that come from a long way just to drink nectar from that flower that's open for one day. In the shimmering heat of the sun's burning glare, you might think you see something that's not really there. This is called a mirage. It's a bit like a dream. Things you think you are seeing are not what they seem. When you get a bit closer, things fade out of sight. They were not there at all. It's a trick of the light. In a dry, dusty desert, if you suddenly see something green ahead, like some plants or a tree, this is called an oasis. Where these plants are growing, somewhere in the ground, there is water flowing. So in the first page here, we have a mirage. That's when you think you see plants and water, but it's really just the glare of the sun, and they're not really there. That's called a mirage. But here on the next page, you really do see some plants, animals, and water, and that's called an oasis. They're not very often seen in the desert, but every once in a while there's a spot underground where there's enough water that plants can grow there, and that's called an oasis. Some deserts are hot and the sun's burning light, but the temperature falls and it gets cold at night. Then the world comes alive with owls, foxes, and bats, coyotes and rabbits, mice, deer, and rats. Because we said they're nocturnal. They come out when it's cooler. Nocturnal animals come out, and soon they search to find food by the light of the moon. Before the sun rises, they all disappear. You would think all the animals never were here. There they are, out at night, and then back in their cool homes when the sun comes up. Not all deserts are hot. Now that's a surprise. Did we hear that correctly? Not all deserts are hot. The next place we'll go is the Gobi. So this is another name of a desert. We had the Mojave, the Sonoran, the Sahara, the Namib. This one is a desert that's not hot. It's called the Gobi Desert. And here we will find ice and snow. This Bactrian camel is happy to meet you. Some camels have one hump. Bactrians have two. The dromedary camel has one hump, and the Bactrian camel has two humps. And you can find Bactrian camels in the Gobi Desert. If he goes a long time without eating or drinking, the humps on his back start steadily shrinking. They're not filled with water, but instead they contain fat. When he can't eat or drink, he keeps going on that. I filled up my bathtub and filled up my sink. That's about at one time what a camel can drink. So he stores fat in those humps, and when he goes for long periods of time without finding any water or food, he gets his nutrition from the fat that's stored in those humps. And if you filled up your bathtub and your sink, that's about the same amount of water that a camel could drink at one time. So when he does find water, he drinks about a whole bathtub and sink full because he knows he won't get it again for a long time. He can drink 30 gallons of water, and then he can go a whole week before he drinks again. We need to drink every day, lots of water, about 6 glasses. But the camel can drink 30 gallons and then not drink again for a whole week. Here's the Bactrian camel in the Gobi Desert, and here he is drinking as much water as he can get. Antarctica is the largest desert of all. Did you know Antarctica is a desert? The air is so cold here that rain never falls. This desert is covered with ice and with snow. The ice never melts here, and freezing winds blow. It is dark in the winter and cold through the year. Though scientists visit, no people live here. Penguins have a way to survive the cold weather. They get close to each other and huddle together. So no people can live in Antarctica because the ice never melts and it's too cold there. But penguins can live there, and they stay warm by huddling together. There's a picture of the Antarctica with the wind and the cold and the ice, and there's the cute little penguins huddling together. Today you've seen things that few people will see, and I'm so happy you saw them with me. A desert, it's true, is a harsh habitat, but I hope you've discovered it's much more than that. No day in a desert is ever the same. And once you've been there, you are glad that you came. So it's a harsh habitat. That means it's not easy to live there. But we learn that God made the plants and the animals and the birds that live there to be able to have special parts of their bodies that help them survive that heat and that harsh climate. And sometimes the desert is a very beautiful place. Here's a picture of all the animals that are living there together. So that is what our friend Cat and Hat had to teach us about living in the desert. How many things did you learn? Did you remember those names of the different deserts? The Sonoran, the Mojave, Antarctica, the Gobi Desert, the Namib Desert. What did you learn about camels? One hump or two? The Bactrian or the dromedary? What animals do you remember that live in the desert? All these things are interesting things that we've learned about the desert. And we have one more book that will help us remember those things. And we'll study it tomorrow together. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.